Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, the Timberwolves offense has shifted dramatically since the start of the new calendar year. We'll talk about what's changed the most and how that could impact the Wolves moving forward. It's all coming. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Happy Hump Day and happy Timberwolves game day. The Wolves take on the Bucks at home tonight, the first matchup against Milwaukee. We will talk about that toward the end of the show today, but I want to spend most of the show talking about the Timberwolves' dramatic shift in their offensive approach since, it's a bit of an arbitrary, Jan 1, right? We could do the month-by-month thing, which is always arbitrary, but it's clean to do it at the start of the year. And that is really approximately when we started to see this shift in how the Wolves play offensively. So we'll talk about the really, I don't use the word dramatic lightly. Like it's a really stark difference how they played in October, November, the first part of December into now January, February, and things have really shifted. So we'll talk about that here on the show. A big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And a reminder that you can subscribe to the daily newsletter at LockedOnDaily.com. It's one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free right now at LockedOnDaily.com. All right, so I teased this a bit at the end of the show on Monday, I think it was, when I did a bit of a semi-post-game pod from Saturday's game and then also touched on some offensive stuff. And this is all still true despite the debacle in Cleveland on Monday night. And really, like, what I used January 1st, and I mentioned a minute ago, it's a bit arbitrary, but that's really when the Wolves started to play a lot better. Remember how bad they had the 3-game losing streak leading into Christmas. I guess we could go back to Christmas Day. They beat Dallas, then they beat Houston and San Antonio, but then they lost 3 straight, Oklahoma City, Boston, Detroit, to start January. And that's really since then, like the Detroit loss on January 4th, was really kind of other, the Cleveland losses against good teams, the Washington loss without Ant. But for the most part, the Wolves have been in close games and they've beaten good teams and they haven't really had any bad losses. The 2 Memphis losses each by a bucket are bad in the sense that they played bad in clutch time, but every game has been close. There's clearly been a shift in how they play. The Wolves have I think, the third best point differential or third best net rating as a team since Jan 1 in the entire league. And they're, I think, 10-6 since then. Of course, the Pythagorean would suggest they should be like 13-3. They've just been bad in close games. And by the way, 13-3 sounds a lot better than 10-6, doesn't it? So I dug into the offensive numbers a bit, and I mentioned this on Monday, and I guess I'll start here. But Chris Finch, this is clearly an intentional shift, and something this dramatic is going to be something that is intentional. But Chris Finch acknowledged it. I think it might have been after the Bulls win last week. I guess exactly a week ago. Maybe it was the Houston win last Thursday. I think it was the Houston win where Chris Finch acknowledged the emphasis the Wolves are putting on offensive rebounding and talked about it as like, hey, this is what teams are doing around the league. By definition, if you're crashing the glass and there's guys leaking out and transition the other way, you're going to have the result of that. If the defense is leaking out to run out against you in transition, the prevailing thought previously was, oh, we got to get back, right? You shoot the ball. This isn't, it isn't middle school basketball. You don't follow your shot, right? You shoot the ball, you get back defensively. You don't just let them contest and release down the floor. Well, the counter to that is if they're releasing down the floor, say there's 2 guys sprinting down the floor for a fast break opportunity and you rebound all 5, it's now 5-on-3. And you should have an advantage to secure the offensive rebound. And then there's some other, if you're on offense, you're facing the basket. Some of the defenders aren't. You might have an advantage to track the ball off the rim. If you're crashing 5 against 3, you should have a really strong rebound rate, offensive rebound rate. And that's a clear shift to what the Wolves have been doing. And part of that is personnel, because that's something Rudy Gobert should be good at and is good at when he has an effort, when he makes an effort to do it. When he's encouraged to do it in terms of the game plan, offensive rebound versus get back defensively. And also they've got some big wings and guards that have a knack for the ball. Like Dante DiVincenzo, he's hurt, but he's a good offensive rebounding guard. Jalen Clark should be a really good offensive rebounding guard who's effectively filled a chunk of Dante's minutes. They should be good at doing this. And that's exactly what they've been doing. So what I want to do is look at some of those numbers pre-Jan 1 and then post-Jan 1. So through the month of December, October, November, December, Minnesota was 20th in the league in offensive rating, according to Cleaning the Glass. These are all going to be Cleaning the Glass numbers for these first couple segments here. Minnesota was 20th in offensive rating league-wide. They were 14th in effective field goal percentage, which is fine. I'm going to look at the 4 factors here. They were 22nd in turnover rate, which is not good, but reflective of how they've played for a while now. It's how they played last year. Just 17th in offensive rebound rate and 20th in free throw rate. So the amount of free throws they shoot per field goal attempts. They were 20th. Okay. The 2 I want you to focus on, effective field goal percentage is important. We'll talk about that too. But offensive rebound rate and free throw rate, they were 17th and 20th respectively until December 31st. Since January 1st, so now 5 plus almost 6 weeks, Minnesota is 6th in the offense over the last 6 weeks. They are 5th in effective field goal percentage, up from 14th. They're still 20th in turnover rate, up from 22nd. But they're 9th in offensive rebound rate, up from 17th, and they're number 1 in the entire NBA in free throw rate since January 1st. And obviously Anthony Edwards is a big reason for that, but it's still indicative or reflective of how they're choosing to play offensively now, with, of course, Anthony Edwards being a big part of what they do on offense. So they're making a concerted effort to crash the glass, rising from 17th league to 9th in offensive rebound rate and the free throw rate, which is also impacted positively by grabbing more offensive rebounds. Because if you get an offensive rebound and you go back up with it, that I guarantee you that there's a higher probability you're going to get fouled. Like the free throw rate on a putback attempt is going to be higher than on any other half court shot. And I've said that about transition opportunities too. And I feel like the Wolves, and we'll talk a bit about that too, because that's also increased, is being more aggressive, selectively aggressive in transition, which can also increase your free throw rate. If you put the defender in a bad spot, you're either going to get a layup, an open 3, or get fouled in most cases, except against Cleveland on Monday when the Wolves botched 3 3-on-1 breaks somehow. But the free throw rate and the offensive rebound rate are massive. Those differences are. Related to the offensive rebound rate, which is this first point that I really want to make. The Timberwolves, like digging into that further, if you look on Cleaning the Glass, you could sort by half court and then by putbacks. The Timberwolves, in the first 2 months of the season, the Timberwolves, under putbacks on Cleaning the Glass, they have points per miss. So how many putback points did the Wolves score per 100 missed field goals / reboundable free throws? Okay. The Timberwolves in the first stretch of the season were 22nd in points per miss. 22nd in points per miss. They were 24th in plays per miss, which is how many putback plays did the team generate per 100 missed field goals / reboundable free throws. A play is anything that results in a shot, turnover, or free throws. Okay. So both are important numbers. They play into each other, of course. The more plays, the more points in general. So they were 22nd in points per miss, 24th in plays per miss. Since January 1st, the Timberwolves are number 1 in the NBA in points per miss shot and 3rd in plays per miss. So not only are they rebounding at a higher clip, they're still only 9th in the league, but it's gone up dramatically. They've been effective in what they do with those misses, and chalk that up to Rudy Gobert getting all those offensive rebounds and getting up and, going back up and getting fouled. Jaden had a couple of big offensive rebound games, and he's been getting fouled more frequently. Anthony Edwards to a lesser extent, but his offensive rebound rate has gone up as well. So they're turning their increased opportunities that they're generating off of offensive rebounds into real production. 3rd in plays per miss, which again is anything that results in a shot, a turnover, a free throw off of a reboundable missed free throw or shot. And number 1 in points per miss. So they've increased the opportunity and they've increased the production off of crashing the glass more often. And it's something that Chris Finch acknowledged in his post-game presser about a week ago, I think against the Rockets after that game, saying, look, hey, this is where the league is moving. And the Wolves, not only have they now acknowledged that, they have the personnel to execute that. And for a team that struggles in the half court, when Ant's not going, like, we can't run away from the fact that this offense continues to struggle in the half court when Ant's not going, and especially with no Julius Randle to turn to, no Dante DiVincenzo to turn to. And they started the shift before those injuries, to be clear. And honestly, like having those guys on the floor is going to help in this regard too. But it's also provides cover. If this approach will provide cover for guys missing due to injury, because anyone can crash the glass, and they've got guys who are pretty good at it. Like Luka Garza hasn't played well. It's one of the few things he does well. I mean, that sounds. I don't mean to say. I mean, I do mean that, but it's one of the things he does best, right? Like he's struggled mightily since he's been in the rotation over the last week, but he can crash the glass. He's a good offensive rebounder. Jalen Clark, for a guard, is a good offensive rebounder. Jaden McDaniels is a good offensive rebounder when he actually, corner crashes and is locked in on the offensive glass. So it's a strategy that's a clear strategy shift that's working out well for the Wolves to this point. I do want to dig in a bit on transition opportunities, and I will touch on defense too. Not as much has changed. And we'll touch on free throw rate, which is related to offensive rebounding in transition. And then we'll shift and look at the Bucks matchup here in a bit. That's what we'll do for the rest of the show today. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at WayFair. After the holiday hustle, there's nothing like giving your home a little TLC. I always find that decluttering and refreshing my space helps me get back into a routine. Whether you're tidying up, clearing out, or just want to give your space a new look to start the year, WayFair has everything you need, all within your budget. We actually right now are looking for a rug and a lamp for our living room. Better believe we've been on WayFair and found some good examples. I actually currently have a few tabs open on my browser, looking at lamps, looking at rugs, looking at coffee tables. The best part about WayFair, though, when we do finally land on something, is the free and hassle-free delivery, even for the larger items. WayFair's site is super easy to navigate. You can find everything you need in no time. There's something for every style and every home, no matter your space or your budget. Give your home the refresh it needs with WayFair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WayFair, WayFair.com. WayFair, every style, every home. All right. So we've established the Timberwolves are crashing the glass more often and finding success while doing so. The other thing I mentioned they've done a lot more of is they've increased their free throw rate. And if you just look at the pace of play, and if you look at transition opportunities, like even if you look at the straight up overall transition frequency, so whether you're looking at pace on Basketball Reference, I don't know if you can actually sort that by like time period within the season, or just the transition opportunities on cleaning the glass, it's actually not up that much. However, the point I want to highlight, if you dig a layer deeper, is that they're running more off of steals. And they're not necessarily generating that many more turnovers than they were early in the season. In fact, that's actually gone down. They're generating less turnovers defensively, which is not great. But the defense itself, like in short, they were a top 5 defense through December 31st. They've been 7th in the league since January 1st, but the turnover rate has dropped from a top 10 mark to just 18th in the league. However, when they do turn other teams over, they're running way more frequently off of steals. In the first 2+ months of the season through December 31st again, they were 20th in transition frequency off of steals. So how frequently did they run? Did they get out in transition off of generating a steal from the opponent? They were 20th. Since January 1st, they're 11th. Through December 31st, they were 18th in points per possession in transition opportunities off opponent, off of steals from opponents. And they were also 18th in points per play. Since January 1st, they're 7th in points per, I said points per possession. It's actually points per, Points per 100 plays or something like that. And 5th in points per play. Okay, so they went from 20th to 11th in frequency, from 18th to 7th, and 18th to 5th in points per possession, points per play. So but overall, again, the pace isn't up that much. They're not running any more off of defensive rebounds. It's just not who the Wolves are. But they're getting out in transition more frequently off of steals, which is where I've always said, and I go back about a year. We're almost to a year. I think Cat got hurt, the first week of March last year? And the Wolves started to run a little bit more. And I made the point that I thought whenever Rudy was off the floor, I thought the Wolves should try and run, should try and bring back. It's not exactly the Jared Vanderbilt, Patrick Beverley Wolves of a few years ago under Chris Finch, but I thought they should play with more pace because, with Rudy off the floor, there's really not a lot of downside. The rest of the team is athletic enough, fast enough, long enough. You can get back in transition and, limit opponent transition opportunities, but there's low-hanging fruit in transition off of steals especially. And I thought the Wolves didn't do a good enough job of running off of steals. And it was something we talked about in the offseason too. And they didn't do it the first part of this year. They were the bottom third of the league in transition frequency off steals. And now they're 11th since January 1st, knocking on the door of the top third in the league, taking advantage of opponent mistakes, taking advantage of easy scoring opportunities, which is important for a team that's so good defensively that in theory should. And again, they haven't generated that many steals or that many opponent turnovers since January 1. But a team that is a good defensive team that should generate more opportunities in transition. It's also a team that struggles offensively in the half court at times. And so it makes sense for the Wolves to try and do that. The last thing I want to hit on here is a bit of a, I mean, it's back related to the offense. We could talk about the shot selection. And I mentioned the effective field goal percentage since January 1st is up to 5th in the league, or it is 5th in the league since January 1st, I should say, not cumulatively for the season. Through December 31st, it was 14th, which is fine, but 5th is better, and they've been 5th since January 1st. So we could break down a little bit like what that shot profile looks like. So the location effective field goal percentage, which the definition for that in Cleaning the Glass is if the Wolves shot the league average field goal percentage from each location, like where they take their shots, what would their effective field goal percentage be? What it is taking a look at what the shot profile is. What's the expected field goal percentage based on where they're taking their shots from. So they were 11th in the league through December 31st. Not bad. Bottom third in mid-range jumpers in the 20th to 22nd range, depending on where they're shooting from within the mid-range. And they were top 5 in corner threes and all threes. They were 5th in the league in each of those frequency. I'm talking frequency, not accuracy. They were only 22nd attempts at the rim, however, which was an issue. Since January 1st, they're up to 3rd in the league in location effective field goal percentage. Again, they were 11th in location effective field goal percentage. Now they're 3rd. They're shooting less in the mid-range, bottom 6 in the league in mid-range attempts. Actually, all mid-range together, they're second to last in terms of mid-range frequency, which is outstanding. First part of the year through December 31st, they were 22nd. So that's gotten even lower. They went from 22nd to 5th in rim percentage of shots at the rim, not accuracy, but frequency. 5th in the league now in rim, and they're shooting less threes overall. They're actually only 8th in three-point frequency since January 1st. They were 5th, and they're only 15th in corner three-point frequency. They were 5th in the first chunk of the season. So the three-pointers have gone down, but the rim attempts have gone way up. And the free throw rate has gone way up. Why? Well, because the rim attempts are up. That's the biggest, most obvious reason. Running off of steals helps as well. And the mid-range jumpers have come down. You could sacrifice a few of those three-point attempts, and they're still top 10 in three-point rate since January 1st. But they're also top 5 in rim attempts, and they're number 1 in free throw rate. That is the recipe to being a top 5 offense. And again, they're 6th in offense, according to Cleaning the Glass, since January 1st. It's the perfect recipe for the Wolves. Like, things are absolutely trending in the right direction. And I'll say it again. Crashing the glass on offense, easier opportunities to score, more opportunities to score, higher free throw rate. Running off of steals in transition, exact same thing. Overall, which both of those things, offensive rebounding and running off of steals, impact this, but also in the half court, getting to the rim, being top 5 in rim attempt rate since January 1st. Also will lead to, obviously, better shots, easier shots, and more free throw opportunities. They're number 1 in free throw rate, and they're still top 10 in three-point rate. They're 8th in three-point rate since January 1st. That is a palatable mix. And especially, I know DiVincenzo isn't shooting the ball as well this year as he was coming on before the injury, but like missing DiVincenzo, that impacts your three-point, both rate and accuracy. Missing Julius Randle impacts your free throw rate. Julius Randle, for a long time, had the Wolves' best free throw rate. Like, he gets the line at a high clip. Not having him hurts. And yet they're doing all this without those pieces. So, yes, there's been some bumps, which is, putting that very lightly. But things are trending in the right direction for this team, especially on the offensive end of the floor. And obviously, Ant scoring 40-plus in each of the last 3 games he's played in makes a big difference, too. And we've seen, like against Cleveland on Monday, when with no Julius Randle, no DiVincenzo, and also no Mike Conley to help be the straw that stirs the drink, there were a lot of offensive issues for the Wolves because it was only Ant. Like, nobody else scored more than 13 points. And nobody was shooting the ball well. Nas was 1 of 6 from 3. Like, when nobody else could generate offense, it's a problem. But when this team is healthy and when Ant's on, the offense is starting to show some signs of life. And I do think we have to credit the coaching staff. I talked earlier about how we have to admit this is a half-court offense that just has not improved. That is in some ways reflective on the coaching staff, yes. But I think we also have to give credit where credit's due, understanding that the shot mix and the approach overall needed to shift, and that's what we're seeing happen in real time, and it's helping. Again, the Wolves are, sixth in the league in point differential and net rating, or third in the league, maybe, I think it was, since January 1st. Like, things are trending in the right direction. They've got to win some of these close games, and they've got to get healthy. All right, let's close by talking Wolves-Bucks. That's the game we have tonight. We'll talk about that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Open Phone. Running a small business means you're wearing a lot of hats. Your personal phone becomes your business phone, and before you know it, you're juggling customer calls day and night. As your team grows, it becomes impossible to manage everything with just your personal number, and that's where Open Phone comes in. It's the #1 business phone system designed to help you keep your work and personal life separate. For just $15 a month, the cost of a few coffees, you get complete transparency and visibility into everything happening with your business phone number. Open Phone works through an app on your phone or computer and integrates with tools like HubSpot and hundreds of others. It also uses AI-powered call transcripts and summaries, so you'll have a rundown of your calls and action items the second you hang up. If you miss a call, no problem. Automated messages are sent directly to your customer, ensuring you never miss an opportunity to engage. Right now, Open Phone is offering 20% off your first 6 months when you go to openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. That's Openphone, OpenPhone.com/LockedOnNBA for 20% off 6 months. Openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. And if you have existing numbers with other service, Openphone will port them over at no extra charge. All right, let's talk Wolves-Bucks. First time we've seen Milwaukee this year. It's weird. I feel like there was like a decade there where the Wolves played the Bucks in like the first or second game of the year every time, either in Minnesota or Milwaukee. It's been a minute since the Wolves have played Milwaukee early in the season. It feels like in recent years it's been Detroit, right, that they play very early, or Charlotte very early in the season. Anyway, Bucks, of course, made a big deadline trade. They shipped out Chris Middleton, which, after he'd been there for like a dozen years, they got Kyle Kuzma. They also landed Jericho Sims from the Knicks. The Knicks felt comfortable enough giving up a bit of front court depth with Mitchell Robinson and Cat. The Bucks were trying to get deeper. The Bucks were trying to expand their bench. They've got older stars that get hurt. Damian Lillard is probable for this game. He's very likely to play. Pat Connaughton, the same thing. Giannis will not play, though. Giannis has missed, I think, 4 straight games, and he's going to be out till after the All-Star break. So the Timberwolves over at FanDuel are 6.5-point favorites at home against Milwaukee tonight. The Bucks are just 10-15 on the road this year. Of course, they got off to a terrible start this season, but they've been much better lately. I say that. They had been much better until this recent stretch, especially with no Giannis, where they've really struggled. They got off to just a horrific start at the very beginning of the season, and then played much, much better as we got into December, January. And then of late, they've lost 6 of their last 8 games. Last time out, they lost to Golden State. They did beat the Sixers and the Hornets, so their only 2 wins over their last 8 games. They lost at Atlanta, at OKC. They lost big at home to the Grizzlies, got blown out at San Antonio and at Portland. So it's been a rough stretch, a very winnable game for Minnesota, especially no Giannis. They have the Wolves actually, it's not on a back-to-back, which is nice. Neither is Milwaukee, but obviously at home. A very winnable game for Minnesota. And with a back-to-back against OKC on Thursday, who is the best team in the NBA, bar none, it feels silly to call it a must-win, but it's a little bit like what I said about, I think it was the Portland game Saturday, like, hey, before this next week, you got to win against Portland because it's going to be tough to win 2 out of 3 or 3 games against OKC, Milwaukee, and Cleveland with a back-to-back mixed in. And sure enough, they won Saturday and then lost Monday to Cleveland. So this is a very important game for the Wolves to win. Thursday against OKC is going to be a really hard game for them to win. So they got to win against Milwaukee. The matchup itself, especially with no Giannis, it's not a terrible one for Minnesota. I actually feel pretty good about what the Wolves need to do in this game. The Bucks are dead last in offensive rebound rate. One of the things I didn't mention when I kind of went through all the numbers since January 1st is the Timberwolves' defensive rebound rate has gotten worse. They're doing a worse job locking down the glass. That's been one of those things that's really kind of gone in waves. I would even say last year and this year, where there's been stretches where they're just atrocious on the glass. And then you look up and it's like, oh, they're actually 12th in the league. It's really up and down. And not having Julius Randle impacts that a little bit. But it hopefully won't be an issue in this game because Milwaukee doesn't offensive rebound the basketball. And especially with the Giannis, like Giannis it leads them in offensive rebound rate and offensive rebounds per game. He's like, without him, there shouldn't be any issues. The Timberwolves just need to secure rebounds. Don't worry about getting out in transition, which again, as I said earlier, they don't off of defensive rebounds anyway, but just rebound all 5 on the defensive end, secure it. Don't give them a second bite at the apple. Milwaukee's 12th in 3-point attempt rate. They're second in percentage. Obviously Dame is a huge driver behind that. And he very likely will play in this game. Chris Middleton, he'd been, in and out of the lineup, had been injured, but 41% from 3. He's not there. So, it's Taurean Prince. Old friend Taurean Prince is shooting an incredible 46% from 3 this year on 4 attempts per game. AJ Green, Gary Trent Jr., other guys over 40% for them. So this is a Bucks team that will let it fly. And if you give them second chance opportunities, you better believe they're going to kick it out and shoot threes versus, going up and trying to score off of offensive rebounds. Brook Lopez obviously still big, will be important if they get offensive rebounds. Not that he does a ton of it, but also a good 3-point shooter. Like they would rather shoot those threes than anything else. Milwaukee also, they do not turn it over offensively. So it's important that the Wolves play sound and just focus on contesting shots, closing out to the touch on all these guys instead of, half-hearted closeouts, closing out under control, making sure they can turn around, box out, rebound will be important too, because you're not going to generate a ton of turnovers against the Bucks. On the other side of the floor, Milwaukee does not give up a lot of second chance opportunities. They're top 10 in defensive rebound rate. They also don't turn you over a lot, which might not matter because the Wolves sometimes can be so sloppy, although that is something that's improved a little. We identified not a whole lot since January 1st. So play solid on both ends. With no Giannis, it's not rocket science. Play solid on both ends, lock down the glass, especially on the defensive glass. Don't let them get out and run unnecessarily. Don't foul like crazy. Milwaukee doesn't draw that many fouls, especially without Giannis. Again, like he's the driver there too. And you should be all right. Like this is a very winnable game. A no Giannis Bucks team that's lost 6 out of 8 is a very, very winnable game for Minnesota. As I said a little bit ago, the Timberwolves have the OKC Thunder tomorrow night. It's a TNT game, a 7:30 tip in Minnesota. That is a tough game. Second night of a back-to-back against a Thunder team that just don't lose. They're 43-9. The last time they lost was a couple weeks ago against Golden State. Since the Wolves saw them last, which, I guess that was longer ago than I was thinking it was. But like they're beating everybody and they're beating everybody by a lot. Like they haven't even played a close game since they lost to Golden State a week and a half ago. All their wins have been by, they had a 12-point win over Toronto and a 13-point win over the Grizzlies. I mean, those are their closest games over their last 6. So it's a exceedingly tough game on Thursday. Very important that the Wolves come out with a win against Milwaukee tonight. All right. That's all we got for you in the show here today. We'll have the Locked On Wolves postcast over at Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube tonight live. And then that audio will be posted to this audio feed. So if you can't catch it live, be sure to listen late tonight. I'll have the post-game pod. We'll post early on Thursday. And then, of course, we'll do it all over again Thursday night with the last game before the All-Star break. And then All-Star break, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Wolves don't play again until I think next Thursday. So, yeah, be sure to tune in tonight to the postcast if you can and catch it on the audio feed. Otherwise, a big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. A reminder, you can subscribe to the Locked On Wolves daily newsletter at lockedondaily.com. It's one stop for all things Wolves and all things NBA, delivered right to your inbox every day, Monday through Friday. Sign up at lockedondaily.com. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.